Thank
Hi,
you.
welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Bob Davis, and he has done a lot of research into near-death experience. And could you give us a little bit about your educational background? Because you're pretty much a smart person.
Well, on paper, I have a PhD. I'm a research scientist. I published many articles and grants and did all that for decades. I retired about 7 years ago, started writing books. And by the way, I have a tooth pulled here, so you're going to have to deviate attention away from that gap in my mouth. Point. I started investigating anomalous experiences. I was always interested in ufology. And as I wrote books on UFOs, I wrote a book. I then had a shared death experience, which really caught my attention. I had a lucid dream. I was suffocating. And remember, I'm a left-brain scientist. Okay, I'm suffocating. I knew I was going to die. It was that feeling of terror. It woke me up. I had the sense. I had the knowingness that my friend who I worked with at the college had died. I soon later found out that morning that she did die. A shared death experience, not very common, but people have them. Knowingness, what is that about? Well, that caused me to write my book, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. So these experiences kind of shifted that left brain scientist of mine into trying to realize what's going on, or trying to understand better scientifically what's going on. So I went to the literature and I looked at all the evidence from Moody's evidence and Kenneth Ring. I could bore you all to death. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, your audience, since they're interested in the topic. But here we have a left brain person becoming more right brain because he's having these kinds of experiences. I saw 2 UFOs and I had a Kundalini experience, okay? Which forced me to write my last book, Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You. And information about me and my book is on my website, bobdavisspeaks.com. Now, after doing radio shows and lectures and all that routine, I decided to do a documentary on consciousness, which incorporates, of course, the NDE, OBE, UAP, psychoactive drugs, meditation, all of that, because NDE is part of it in the sense that I realize now that people are having these transpersonal experiences. You know that. Your audience knows that. We're lit. We get it. The cork is out of the bottle. We know that. And studies confirm it. People believe their interactions with ultimate realms, supreme beings, the whole bit, like the back of their hand. And how can you not be changed? Become over time more humane. That's what we see. I've written papers about it, talked to a lot of experiences. It's difficult at first, obviously, but I realized that. So it's a long road for me, from left brain to more of a, I hope, symmetrical brain with a little bit more right.
See, I think of, you describe it that way, and in my brain, I think of it as our physical awareness here to awareness of what's out in here that we don't see, that land of knowing. Like you got your knowing. You were out of your body. You were in that land of knowing. That's where all that stuff just comes. Here, we don't have that availability. And you were in that
You're
land
right.
of knowing.
Peggy, you're exactly right. And Peggy, look, you know more than I. You see, I know the literature. I had a shared death experience, but I didn't pierce that veil. I get it. I've had my share of stuff. Kundalini really knocked my socks off. Okay, it wasn't an NDE, but you know what I'm saying. You know more about it. You experienced it. Many of your listeners know more about it. They experienced it. Here I come along. I put the science to it. I can bore everybody to death.
And we need that. Otherwise, we're just crazy people out here.
Exactly. And it's not only those that have the NDEs, it comes in all forms. And that's what my last book is about. I talk about spiritual emergencies, these triggers, whether it's traumatic, stressful event, on your hands and knees, seeking help because you're lost, you're suffering for whatever reason. And then you have a peak experience. You see it's a clean being. Or you interact with a non-human intelligence associated with an unidentified area of phenomena. I wrote a paper on that and the transpersonal experience, what people have when they have these kinds of experiences, not unique to NDE. I think that's the home run. Mm-hmm. Wow, we got to focus on that. But there's we know that other phenomena seems to be related to the NDE because we have ego dissolution. Once you realize that there is alternate realities, there's more to life. It's far more complex than we could ever imagine. Many other people agree they've had the similar experiences, but yeah, we don't go to psychologists because we're going to be given a medication. We're dissociative, we're etc. Mm-hmm. We that it's a pandemic, and you know what? During the COVID, it's a catastrophe that 5 million plus have died. How many more do you think are having near-death experiences? Think about that. As a result, and of course they are, because on an annual basis, 200,000 people in the United States alone have a near-death experience. And that number is probably less than the actual number. Not many people are going to admit it. Obviously, with COVID especially, come on, that incidence is going to be much higher. The data in the future will confirm that. So what's happening? Newtonian physics with our 3D understanding of reality, just what you were saying, Peggy, our 3D understanding of reality, science only interprets reality, psychologists only interpret reality, personal reality based on that. But when we experience 4D, 5D kinds of realms where we can't figure out what happened to space and time, where I can move about at will, I can see all around me, 360. You know the situation, all of that. Unconditional love, you can't put it in words, ineffable. Sometimes it's hellish. About 10% of the time, we see that it is a hellish-like experience, but predominantly extraordinarily positive. And it knocks your socks off. You're lit. How can you look at life differently? William Shatner goes up into space. You know what? A peak experience. I call it that. A peak experience. That overview effect of the blue dot in space transforms many people, maybe not all. Some, however, now realize the fragility of the ecological state of the planet. There's more to life. They're changed. Their personal belief systems and values, even considerations about religion, or even the one they love. The divorce rate is significantly higher among people who have NDEs. The data suggests that, probably true for UAPs, whatever the trigger may be. A person is changed.
You can't be in that land of knowing and come back and still be partly in the knowing.
You're in the knowing. Where are you? You add a little quantum physics at it. Look, you're right. Are you in a semantic field? Are you in an information field? The black envelope of the envelope of the black hole, I should say, theoretically contains all information that ever happened, happening now, and will happen. Again, no time, no space. Things that quantum physics says about reality supports, I should say, the perceptual alterations that people are explaining, that people have when they have NDEs, psychoactive drugs, all these altered states of consciousness, and what it feels like, the time distortions, the interactions with other beings, all of that. And now quantum physics comes along. Not that it has the answers to everything, but it certainly has more answers than Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is here. The population is here in terms of awareness. There's a gap. People are having these kinds of peak experience. The gap gets wider. We need new science integrated with existing science to elevate that, to close the gap. I'm doing a documentary, consciousnessfilm.info. Consciousnessfilm.info. Trailer is there. GoFundMe is there. I'm not begging for money. I'm waiting for the rich dude, with deep pockets who resonates with this. If you want to give money because conceptually you support this issue of consciousness. Now we're talking about consciousness here. We don't know what it is, but we know there's something else. Knowingness. You hit it on the head, Peggy. I give you credit. You're really right on. a knowingness. Now look at that. And that concept of knowingness is quite interesting because we know there are animals that demonstrate that perception of knowingness. We see that where there's no visual input, auditory input, olfactory, yet they know many miles away danger lurks. Now, if that, some animals demonstrate that, that's been shown. Knowingness, what is that? Could humans have a better sense of knowing? It would be nice, wouldn't it? Maybe in the future we'll develop or cultivate that innate skill that we may have. Or, like you say, could be an information exchange with something that quantum physics and researchers who are in the documentary I have are looking at another force, energy, maybe torsion energy, maybe spin energy, something that provides that sense of knowing, or maybe it's an aspect of brain function we don't understand, that other sense that's simply not developed. But when you have these peak experiences, you know there's something else, quite whether it's explainable or not. Evidence supports it in literature where human perception and its alterations that occur under these kinds of conditions when people are close to death, where they have out-of-body near-death experiences, are consistent with many theories in quantum physics. They are. Doesn't mean that we have an answer, but it provides some source of comfort to those like me who have a left brain, who have an NDE, a Kundalini, who question reality now. What's going on? And I'm darn curious. And I question life. I question maybe who I love, materialism, my belief in God. Profound issues in life are now being questioned like never before. Why? Why is this? Why do we see the results of a study out of Johns Hopkins University just recently? Approximately 100 individuals claimed they were atheists, staunch atheists, before they took a drug, I believe it was psilocybin, microdose. And people are experimenting with that, of course. The point is this, approximately 45 to 50% of those individuals, after administration of that psychoactive drug, now believed in the supreme being. Okay, let's say that again. You understand? What do I do with that? What does Bob Davis, left brain scientist, do with that? It's for an external agent to alter one's not perceptual, but philosophical values, religiosity, all of that, so pronounced. Right now, believe in what happened in that experience. You see, we don't fully understand qualitatively their description of the essence of the experience, science of the subjective. You see, Newtonian physics has nothing to, so what are you talking about? That's a problem, a big problem. What is the science of the subjective in these individuals that have the NDE, the psychoactive drug effects like this? Why do we see such changes? Is it
because God exists,
or is it information, like you say? We're more open, aware, awake. And when you're aware, you become more awake, and you become more. It feeds on itself, and bada bing, you access information. You suppress the ego. The world doesn't revolve around me. Now I revolve more. We're not perfect by no means. We got a long way to go, people. Let's get this. We're living with the brain. It impedes. You said this earlier, and you're right. The brain inhibits our ability to perceive true reality. Let me say that. You know that. Our brain, we need it. We evolved from this primordial soup, maybe. It's good at 3D stuff. It's designed that way. I hear it. We know this. Perfect for 3D. Then bada bing. I'm not in 3D anymore. A little confusing, isn't it?
I hear so much that universities try to successfully get their students to believe that God does not exist, like the show, God's Not Dead. And in doing so, they are just building those blinders and educated community out there that it doesn't exist. And as long as they believe God doesn't exist, they're never going to find the last piece of this puzzle, because it is God exists. So many NDEers even that want to say still that God doesn't exist, they want to believe they themselves are God. I think you listen to the near-death experiences, watch, listen. So many of them had a guide, a voice, a presence that helped them, that explained things to them. This is outside of us. That land of knowing, that isn't based on our little brain trying to figure this new realm out. They are coming in and helping us. They come in, I call it the language of heaven. They come in scenarios. They can show you something from your past, like, oh, okay, I get it now. Or they can show you something completely new. Just like if right now I could poof right here, and now you watch this little cartoon or this little movie. There, you see it? You understand it? I don't have to sit here and tell it. That's how intelligent the land of all knowing, God's realm, heaven realm, whatever people want to call it. But as long as they are trying to prove that God does not exist, that God does not control this entire realm of knowing, they're not going to figure nothing out. They're going to come up with lame excuses after lame excuses until they get the blinders off and realize, excuse me, I'm sorry, there is a God. And at 5 years old, when I drowned, that's the first thing that happened. This little scene pops up, and like, oh, it taught me, oh, I'm dead now. I didn't think, I thought, well, there's no such thing as drowning. I'm not dead. And then I was just this ghost kid out here in this whole out of body thing, running around playing. But there was voices coming in telling me, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back. Okay, that wasn't me at 5 years old telling myself that, because when she said that, because I could tell it was a female adult voice, I didn't see her. Oh, well, that's not how death works. That's what I thought at 5. That's not how death works. We don't go back. So I don't have to listen to anybody now because I'm dead. I'm going to go run down the highway, fly down the highway, do what I want. I'm not going to listen. And so and then other voices come in. And a voice said, but this was like a telepathic, she was like outside, like I could tell like physically how far she was away. And it said, well, first it let me know that my family didn't love me. I'm like, oh, it was just like a knowing just come. Like, I didn't know that. I kind of had some hints of things, but I didn't know that. That makes sense. Yeah, at least I thought my mom loved me. And then audible telepathic said, God sends children here to be loved. That is why he sends them here. Like, well, that's not fair. You just showed me, And so there is intelligence coming in. This isn't us. That wasn't me at 5 years
old.
You're
talking about what, scientists, psychologists, parapsychologists, and we have them in the documentary, talk about non-locality. And quantum physics supports just that. Information exchange, despite space and time. Invisible pathway, ESP. ESP is real. We see it in the laboratory. I can give you the data. ESP is real. It supports, again, non-locality, telepathic communication, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis. It's all real. Subtle effects. You have an antenna. Recent research, Gary Nolan in Stanford, who's an immunologist, geneticist, he's finding from those who are experiencers, people like you, who get that, who interact with UAPs, antennas, right? Why you? Why you?
I died.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
I was there.
Right. But what is about that? And they're now confirming, yeah, there certainly can be this kind of interaction where even people like Eben Alexander, Proof of Eben, bestseller, he's in the documentary. He tells me the story that when he had his NDE, he interacted with a beautiful woman who told Eben that she was his sister who died before he did. He never knew that. Mm-hmm. Gave him information about the family, etc. When he recovered, talked to the parents and said, hey, I had a sister who died before I was born, named X-wife, So he gives them all the information. He said, Bob, I couldn't believe it. And they know,
he could have known it.
Those kinds of that, while remarkable, yeah, if you can control it and verify and all that, science won't accept that. It's anecdotal, obviously. But that's where we need the science of the subjective to accept that kind of evidence as reality. Don't you see? And then accept it. You're right. You're not dissociative. You're not schizophrenic. If you went to What did you do with those thoughts? Did you go to your parents and say, hey, talking to me? They send them to a doctor and life, not good. Maybe it's not good because you're misdiagnosed.
We're sane enough to keep our mouth shut because we know what the consequences would be.
That's a good way to put it. That's right. Plus, people who are truly psychotic, and of course there are, let's face it, the symptoms are very different than symptoms in those who will have those altered states of consciousness that are triggered by, however, near death, something out of body, the things we know. But there are two different classes of people, diagnostically, symptomatically. Psychotic is going to show evidence of depression, anxiety, non-functional behaviors, problems with relationship, all of that. And so varying degrees of severity. Whereas the people who may have some, you see, this is where the differential diagnosis is wrong. People like you, let's say, near-death experience, you tell this to a psychologist that doesn't buy what you're saying, you're talking about schizophrenia. You need Thursday. Of course you don't. But they're not educated, they're not aware. People like who have these experiences need to go to experiences, who are psychologists, counselors, who understand the essence of the spiritual emergence, whatever you want to call it. You're very sane, probably too aware. At especially a young age, you had major challenges as a result of that. And to me, that's a violation. You see, there are good aspects of it long term. And when you integrate it and accept it and understand all of that, takes a long time. But we don't know how
Well,
to
it ended up saving my life through a lot of abuse and situations because it gave me a high moral compass and it gave me compassion for people that are unloved.
you become
And I
your
had a
more
keen sense from
humane.
then on.
People become more humane. Bottom line, you understand? That's give me that in a pill. Can you simulate an NDE? What's going on in the brain when I have an NDE? Let's put that in a pill. Obviously, you can't unless you bring me close to death and bring me back. No thanks. But that's what physicians and neuroscientists, a lot of scientists who are experiencers, they retire and then they continue, which is very, very interesting. And they know there's something more to this. And they try to put the science on it, but we don't have it, you see. So we look to quantum mechanics and maybe torsion energy, the spin force, everything in the universe spins, does it not? Electrons around an atom, we know this, the planets around the sun, etc. Well, that seems to be a universal feature, a natural feature of our 3D reality. And plasma, too, is the basic component of the physical universe. It's the fourth state of matter, gas, liquid, that kind of thing, solid. Well, it's an ionized gas. Why can't plasma, the quantum process, interact with quantum processes in the brain? We see evidence of quantum. How can it not be a quantum process? Photosynthesis is a quantum. Meaning what? Meaning it can. The fastest quantum computer, cannot do anything close to the brain. We can't figure out this 3-pound mass of fat and all the complexity of its abilities. And why, let me ask you this, why can't Diane Hennessy Powell, she's in the documentary, leading neuropsychiatrist, doing research at Harvard. I talked to her a few weeks ago and she does research with autistic savants. She wrote the book, The ESP Enigma, an excellent book, and I recommend people look at that. Bob, I know a 4-year-old who's an autistic savant, extraordinary abilities, either music, intelligence, math skills. Rare, but well documented. Rain Man, famous movie. Bob is a 4-year-old, autistic savant. She can speak 6 languages. Did I say, you want me to repeat that? You know what I mean?
He speaks 6 languages at 4 years old.
What does that say? Peggy, what am I supposed to do with that? I know an 8-year-old. Did a lot of experiments with her. Haley is her name, autistic savant. She when you present shapes, colors, you know what I'm saying, things out of her visual field, what is that? Over 90% accuracy on all varying types of ESP related tasks. What am I supposed to do with that, Peggy? maybe she's reading the experimenter's mind. Even if she is, that's remarkable. There's non-locality. What's going on? Another one, we can go on and on. Doesn't know anything about math, but what's a cube root of 4752? And give you the answer to fifth decimal point, and correct. Is that brain? How
I
about
saw a guy was jumped outside of a bar and beat up, and he hid out in his apartment after that because he kept seeing, I think, symbols, math equations and stuff all over, and he just barely got through high school. And all of a sudden he's this math genius and he doesn't know what to make of it. Finally, he goes out of his apartment one time, goes to the mall, just trying to get this all of his head. And he starts scribbling something on a napkin. And just by chance, some math professor walks by and said, I never seen it wrote that way before, but it works. And ends up saying, you need to go to college. And, and so the guy's this genius. But he was seeing math in a different way. It's like probably like the land of knowing the way it sees math. It was not educated math, but it was way, way, above most people's level of math. And I think they end up calling him a savant. And don't they have like different names, like it's from an accident, or if you're born with it, like because his was from an injury?
Yeah, is it purely brain-based or something else? Maybe the person had an NDE and maybe receive that information, possibly. But how about many mathematical theories, functional equations exist today and are being used today that were developed. I forget when, but it was a long, long time ago by an individual from India who knew nothing about math. We have these cases, and science can't explain it, and don't expect them to. I saw the frustration in you earlier. Why can't science, why can't science, they don't listen. I know, don't even fight it. It's happened in our lifetime. Don't look to science to explain it. You don't have the principles to explain it. And the possible principles that do exist, that seem more compatible with altered states of consciousness, that help to explain all of what we're talking about. What is this complexity of life? It's more than 3D. It's metaphorical. It's symbolic. It's knocking our socks off. It's causing transpersonal changes in us in dramatic ways. What do I do with it? It's a pandemic, and everybody ignores it. So we have these social groups. I'm now doing a podcast. What is going on here? So we have these obvious questions. We're seeking the answers. We're light workers. We're lit. We want to know. We know there's more, and science doesn't give us answers. So we turn to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. My answers for me is prayer, connection to God, staying in that connection, and the knowings come, and trust them as they come. And we just had another one yesterday, and and they just come from nowhere. And I don't control them as they come in, but I believe you have to be open and belief in what's happened before, and trust that, and it's never failed you. So for other people, I don't know, just at 60 years old, I'm finally learning how to, I say, like, harness the light, how to harness it myself and keep it and use it. So, to each their own, but it works for me.
Do you regard it as a positive thing? Are you happy you have this? And I'm sure it's created issues in the past, of course. I'm thinking.
Oh, I'm thankful
Fusion,
every time.
Anxiety.
Because I help people. Huh? No, it don't cause anxiety. It releases anxiety. Like yesterday, I had a really confusing situation. As medical professionals was telling me all these different things about my sister, and then this knowing come. And I knew where this force was leading me to go, because I had been praying for God to help me with my sister and do what's best for her. And I've been forced kind of in this way, and there was some resistance, and all of a sudden it opened up. That's where she's meant to be. And I made some calls this morning, and bam, that is so where she needs to be. And it was the solution. It didn't come from the doctors. It didn't come from the kidney specialist. It didn't come, it was this knowing that, oh, okay. Okay, and I told my husband, there it is. We got it.
Peggy, I hear you. You see, you just said, yeah. And we can't explain that. The science of the subjective. There's some essence there of confidence knowing the right thing to do, the other sense that I think represents consciousness, you.
And
Where
it's
you,
even there when we don't know what it is. Back in my late 20s, when I started doing child abuse investigations, it was there and I didn't know what this was. I just assumed, oh, nobody else is paying attention, but I would get confessions real easy and I was really good at these investigations. I would just know these things. And I was so busy, I didn't stop, like, why is this happening to me? And people would say, you're famous around here. You're getting a name for yourself. I'm like, what? I'm just busy. But, now I look back and I can see where it was that knowing.
yeah, it's almost like a psychic skill. That's the way professionals in the business would refer to it as. You had that knowing, psychic. We don't know what word to use. Consciousness, maybe that's that. What is consciousness? Mental intention. I talk to people who contend they can cure cancerous tumors in mice using mental intention alone. I've seen pictures before and after. What's that all about? People consider that valid. The point is, you have that ability. Maybe we can direct it inward and heal ourselves if there's some more mental intention. But who tells us how to cultivate and utilize something that we know does exist, whether it's external, more than likely, that can aid human potential on an individual and societal level. It's like we need Eastern medicine to integrate with Western for so many reasons. Look at it this way. Stress is a killer. Stress alone, 80% of all disorders are either caused by stress or made worse by stress. Now, think about the time when you go to your doctor. Has a doctor ever told you have to work on your stress? We got to meditate. We got to maybe yoga, whatever, does the doctor ever address it? Studies show less than 5% of physicians in the United States talk about it. Some do. The integrated physicians, the younger dudes that are looking at Eastern medicine, they are starting to incorporate some. It is. They realize there's something to it, sure. But that as well. So stress, they get it now, but in the past, you never heard of it. So that's not medicine. It's counterproductive. It's anti-medicine by not advocating stress reduction techniques to patients. So, that's a good example. They don't understand that. How they're going to understand the mind? Something as simple as that. How they understand what you're going through, non-locality, ESP, and to support you and say, that's beautiful. You have a gift. Utilize it. Teach it. Let's cultivate it. Let's all that stuff. But no, people often have resistance. They don't want to talk about it. We know that. People aren't going to understand. How many friends do you lose? Maybe because you tell them maybe your story at NDE, OBE. I see you interact, all that, and people are may look at you differently, right? And they can't help it. Some debunked. Well, you know what? Knowing bad karma. You know who's giving you bad karma and good karma. When you know, you're more aware. What do, Peggy? You get rid of them. They're doing you a favor by criticizing you because now you don't need that bullshit in your life.
Yeah.
All right, goodbye. I just did that with a good friend of mine. I don't need that bad karma. I gave you time. I had enough. I realize now, being a little bit more aware, empathetic, sympathetic, that's bad medicine. Problem is, a lot of people are unfortunately stuck with bad karma in a close family relationship. We all deal with that. It's problematic because that's the worst thing for you. Why don't you just take a knife? You know what living with bad karma is? Especially, it varies, but you know what I mean. It can be horrendous or, just or not. But it's the same thing when you're dealing with somebody who's putting you down, debunking you for your experiences. Why are you doing this podcast, for instance? Why the book? Why all the spiritual awakening stuff? Well, what's going on, man? What's going on? Well, then you have a major issue because it's like taking a knife and stabbing in your stomach. That bad karma is doing the same thing to your immune system.
I look at it as something trying to steal my life. Trying to shadow in on my light. Out.
Huh?
It's like they're a shadow. They're trying to come in on my light, entering darkness into my light. And I'm like, out. I got to keep this light. I got to stay right in here. Just keep on going, because the darkness can make you hit the floor and go down.
It's a constant battle. There's a lot of negative forces and energy that come in the form of people. 1 out of 10 people has a serious personality disorder, meaning you don't want that person in your life. You're not going to see it right away. Sometimes you can, but it can take years before you realize this person's no damn good and bringing me down. We know this. 1 out of 10. So that's a pandemic in and of itself. So we're going to feel this bad karma, of course. I'd love to see these studies. These people who have, let's say, serious problems where they take pleasure out of hurting people, the sociopaths, the psychopaths. Yeah. That's the ills of society. Yeah. And they walk among us. That's the ills of society. They take pleasure out of hurting you. How can you be more inhumane? That's, to me, that's like a devil, sure, in body form. People marry.
And I don't even think they get pleasure from it, because I don't think that space has pleasure.
Well, that's the only pleasure they get. They get some pleasure because they outsmart you. They think they're better than you. The ego, that's their source of pleasure. They don't know love or anything else. Yeah. They don't understand the concept. They become, but many of them, I'd love to see, I'm assuming they have an NDE. I'm wondering if they're changed, I wonder, like some people say I was a psychopath, I had an NDE, and I realized.
Howard Storm, he's always a perfect example.
What do you mean?
Howard Storm was atheist, college professor, went to hell, and, he became a minister, and he's been a minister for decades now, totally changed.
Spoke to somebody about 2 years ago. I was sitting in a Burger King here in America. Some guy comes up to me, just start talking. He's a real nice guy, older gentleman. I started getting into a conversation about religion, spirituality. He's wearing a collar, what the heck? I love talking about it. You see, in the past, I never would. Now, it's a turn on. He gives me a scenario. What happened to him? I was an alcoholic. I was down to my last hope, on my hands and knees, that kind of thing, praying. And as I mentioned it earlier, excuse me, and then I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but then I saw the golden figure, humanoid-like energy being. A lot of people describe it, am I right, as an energy being. Whatever, you can't use words,
See, feel.
Yeah, but he felt it had a supreme being, thought it was Christ. And if it happens to somebody in India, they describe Buddha. The point, related to cultural, but the point is to knowing an extraordinary presence, energy, a God. And from that day on, this is not a unique situation. Like you just shared. Minister went on through the ministries, helping people, gave up alcohol. My gosh. I mean, that's what I call a peak experience. It comes in all shapes and sizes. NDE is a smorgasbord of a peak experience. You really get it because from what I've seen in the literature, and I can only speak from that, but again, I'm speaking about it with the left brain, who has had a shared death experience, like I said. So I know, but I haven't pierced the veil. You know what I mean? I haven't sensed the unconditional love. A woman will say, what do you mean by unconditional love in the near-death experience? A very common symptom, like a feeling of peace and among other things we're familiar with. So she says, well, I can't describe the love I felt when I during my NDE. The best way I could describe it, well documented, good source. It's like a mother looking into her newborn's eyes for the first time, magnified 10 million times. And that doesn't touch it.
We're God's children.
How do you put a word on that? Like cool? Is that wow? You don't. There's no 3D doesn't express it. We don't have a term, a word to express that emotion because we're not familiar with that emotion. It's not part of our reality. Laugh, cry, anger, not unconditional love and interact. We don't have words for that. So it's like looking in the eyes of your first newborn for the first time. People try to grasp at that, and science looks at it. What do I do with it? A good friend of mine, Reverend Michael J. Carter, beautiful soul. He's going to be in the documentary. I want to believe Mike. He's an experiencer, writes books on ancient aliens, a popular show on TV. And I say, Mike, convince me, because you're an experiencer, convince me that people are interacting with UFOs, UAPs, and sensing non-human intelligence, whether it's whatever they are. Bob, yeah, Mike, a gray touched me. What, Mike? You feeling all right, Mike? Bob, a gray, the humanoid associated with the UAP is commonly described, a gray touched me. Okay, what am I going to do with that? I'll say that again. Here I am. I'm now researching the area. I'm writing books, and I'm running into people more sane than I am. They're telling me these stories. Well, you know what? The great touched him because he believes it like the back of his hand. The great touched him. It doesn't matter if a gray did touch him or not. A gray touched him. That's reality. That's his reality. We have to understand that is reality. If you believe it and it changes your life, it's hard to conceptualize that because reality we learn is only this, not the inner essence of the experience and what it does to us in terms of altering our perspectives of life from that moment forward in the form of felt psilocybin, So
I read once that, which I don't know if it was true, but it said that negative blood people are more spiritual. And I thought, well, if that's true, I wonder if they've had more death experiences, if they're more spiritual. So I started doing these little polls on near-death experience groups. And it was coming up every time around 85, 90% of the people that had near-death experiences were negative blood. And I thought that's weird because it's like 10% of the population has negative blood.
Yeah, RH negative blood. Yeah. I know. It's very interesting you said that, Peggy. Very interesting. You're a researcher. You know that? You truly are a researcher in the sense that some people contend, and I don't know how valid it is, that the same thing exists with those who interact with beings associated with unidentified phenomena, those who are so-called abducted. A lot of people say, some people say that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Some people are the people that are abducted. Are they more likely to be negative blood? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that more people who are abducted have a higher incidence of RH negative blood. Yes. Question. And it's interesting that you said that when we see this parallel. We also see a similar parallel in terms of biomarkers in the brain. I mentioned earlier the work by Dr. Gary Nolan, the immunologist, geneticist from Stanford, where he sees greater neural connectivity in an area of the brain, in the center of the brain, in a structure called the putamen. And the question is, just a little bit about what it does, not entirely. The question is, what's so unique about this area that seems to be more mature, neurologically speaking, and those who are experiencers and those who have ESP? Do we have a built-in antenna? Are you structurally, brain-wise different? And that, because of that, do you have that so-called, as they say, antenna where you're now receiving the information? Maybe, easier to receive, frequent. We don't understand it, but from dipole radiation light waves coming from a quantum state, I can bore you with some of these theories, interacting with quantum processes at the cellular DNA level in the brain, allowing for transfers of energy, information, consciousness. Consciousness is information, probably just information. And that knowingness where you get that information, right? Beyond the brain's ability, maybe the brain facilitates. We need the brain, obviously. It's symbiotic with you, with us. So we work in an interdependent way. But once the brain fades to black, right? Hard drives crashes. I don't think that's the end of the ballgame. It's not the end of the ballgame. That's why everybody who has these kinds of experiences loses their fear of death. And once you do all that, you get rid of that a lot of anxiety. Of course, the layers to the onion peel off, and you elevate. But you're on a quest. You see, you're on a passion. It's hard to get off it, and it's good and bad, I find, because it's somewhat frustrating. It's somewhat frustrating, and because there's no answers, and we want the answers, and we expect
I
society.
want the answers because a week before my second NDE, it was an ectopic pregnancy. I had an experience out here on a property. We just bought Green built a house, and my oldest son yelled, "Mom, Jeremy!" And my husband ran, and I was like frozen in fear. And I started praying because I need to be there right now, not in the time it took my feet to get me there. And suddenly I was in the land of knowing, that I now call it. I wasn't there staying in my body. I wasn't down at the creek. I was just like up in the air. And like, oh, I just knew suddenly. I knew what was wrong. My son was drowning in the creek, which I wouldn't have thought of because the property, just a short time we'd had it, it was always ankle deep. But I was in this land of knowing. It's like we had a lot of rain, a lot of melting snow, and the creek got deep. And he was trying to swim. He panicked, he was trying to swim when he could just stand up and walk out. So I started praying then to Jeremy, like instantaneously, "Jeremy, stand up. It's not that deep. Calm down, walk out of there." All right. So Jeremy was like 4 or 5. When Jeremy's about 20, the first time I ever told that story, Jeremy walked out of the kitchen. He's having a New Year's party at the time. And I was telling his cousin and his friend, and the room had several people in it. And he said, he overheard me. He walked out and he said, "Mom, I heard you praying." Like, what? And everybody's mouth dropped. They're like, what? Because Jeremy's not the type person to go around lying, telling stories. I never told this before. And he said, "I heard you praying." He says, "That's what it was." He said, "I panicked and I was trying to swim. And I heard you say, stand up, walk out of there, come down, put your feet down." And everybody's mouth dropped, mine dropped. And so that is like been my push. If I can save my child through prayer by accessing this land of knowing, I want everybody to be able to learn to do this.
Well, you see that? I love it because you want to share it. Now you see how humane you are. It's not ego. Oh, I'm going to keep it for myself. You're exactly right. Why do you think I'm talking to you? I want people to hear this. Wake them up. There's more to life. And we can benefit from it. It's very positive. Pegi, I adore you. You have a unique gift. Come on. Wish everybody could have it. It's wonderful. It's beautiful, and share it as best as you can, and you do it so eloquently and from the heart, and I love you for that. And that's what it's all about. And all your listeners, they listen to you because they resonate and they identify, and that potentiates their own natural awareness, where you start elevating each other, maybe not realizing it, but just talking about it helps tremendously. It does. And it's part of the support and becoming more awake and alive, and turning other people on to it who need to be. Look,
my older son, Matthew, when he was in Afghanistan, I was so scared that he was going to die over there. And I would pray, especially every time I would hear this song called Simple Man that would come on.
Yeah.
And I would stop and pray every time I heard it. And I would say, "God, please just let him live long enough to come home and fall in love, get married, have children." I want my son to know that. I don't want him to die without knowing that joy. Because to me, that's the greatest joy in life.
I love it.
And a couple years after he was injured in Afghanistan, but he was okay. And a couple years after he was home, he never talked about the war or anything, had PTSD. One day he said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." And he said, they had a lot of bad ambushes and they all turned out bad. He said, "But we were ambushed one day." And this is what happened. He said, "We were all talking, it was right in the back of the truck, and the radio was on, and it was all talking and loud, and all of a sudden the song Simple Man come on." He said they all got quiet to hear that song. And they heard the noise about to be ambushed, and they had time to react. He said, "Mom, if that song hadn't come on," he said, "it would have been bad for all of us, because every other ambush just like this."
These things happen all the time, varying ways, of course.
I'm like, pray, people. Start believing in prayer. It works.
Peggy, I have to call it a day. I'm in a time, But look, I would love to do it again. You know, blessed you. Love it.
Thank
And
you.
what you do, that's the main thing. Keep doing what you do. And we're in this together. And so are your listeners and your support is beautiful.
Well, good luck on your project. I'm so happy to hear when anybody's doing anything like this. I would just like to say, please don't do it like Netflix did on Surviving Death, because to me, it's bait and switch. They bring in NDEs and everybody loves them, and then it turns like demonic. And
No. Believe me. Look at the trailer, consciousnessfilm.info, consciousnessfilm.info, the trailer, you'll see. We have the leading experts, Eben Alexander, Jeff Long, Dr. Jeff Long. I'm going to speak with him at 2. How's that sound? In 10
awesome.
minutes, speak with Jeff Long. Talk about synchronicity, okay?
Okay.
Related to the
Thank
film.
you.
Love
Okay,
you.
tell him I said hello.
I will. Thank you, dear.
Thank you. Bye-bye.